Okay, let's start at the beginning. So, scientifically, the creation of the universe came from the Big Bang in a space-time singularity that exploded, expanded. I think it was like 14 billion years ago, 13 billion years ago. And the first question is, what was before the Big Bang, or what was the, philosophy, what was the initiator of creation? And this is the beginning. So the beginning is before their existence. You can't say there's non-existence before existence, because by saying before, you're already implying in the realm of existence. Non-existence as a category cannot be conceived, because as soon as you have a thought or any idea or any kind of inkling of anything, it's already in the realm of existence. So if you try to imagine non-existence, you just get hit like at a wall. It's like you just can't do it. Okay. So there's non-existence, maybe. Two, the Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, there was a point. I forget how big it is now, but very, very small point of where the entire universe, before it was whatever, was in that point. That is in Taoism called Wuji. Wuji means no, wu or not, ji, pole. The reason it's called Wuji, no pole, is because there's no, at that point in time, there's no frame of reference to indicate what, if anything, is there. But notice by speculation at this point, we're in the realm of existence. It was a space-time singularity, meaning there was no distance or separation, even along a straight line, to indicate location, and there was no duration of time. So really, what you have something, but at the same time, there's no way to describe what it could be, or if it's even there, just because there's no relation to separate one thing from another. Wuji's normally by scholars considered to be a singularity, and scientifically that would be Wuji. When Wuji was based off time, it would just be the very pinpoint first point in time, before there was time, and when time existed and didn't exist. So you see, Wuji is hard to conceive of well, because it's filled with paradoxes, I guess. It's one point and it's infinity. It contains everything and it doesn't contain anything, as far as what, it could, because, there's no relation to know either way. It's eternal and it's no time, and so on and on and on. Okay. The second part on that, so you've got non-existence, you've got Wuji, and the third one is Taiji. Now, what Taiji is Tai means supreme or ultimate, and then Ji again means pole. So what you've got here, you've got the state of unobservable relation, and this is my cat. Unobservable relation, and then what Taiji does, it's a point, just like Wuji would be a singularity. Taiji is a singularity point of reference. So it's like literally you take a pole, and the way like the North Pole or the South Pole would be absolute, frame of reference, for latitude of the planet. And so things are described or measured based off those poles. So with Taiji, the universe begins with that pole, giving reference for everything else. So now, as soon as there's a Taiji, Wuji's gone. In fact, Taichi's gone too. At that point, you have relational existence. So you've got your little white point, which started out as Taiji and is not anymore. And then you got your little black point, which started out as Wuji and is not anymore. And even saying a transition isn't correct either, because there's no point in time transition. So literally instantaneously, once the Taiji emerges, at the exact same moment of there being Wuji and the Taiji comes out, now you've got the yin-yang symbol, a white dot and a black dot, the way two planets, independent of any other gravitational field, if they're the same mass and they're orbiting in agreement, without colliding, they will form the yin-yang circle, and then the point of the orbit would be in between as they go around. And the importance of this, I'm going to give an analogy just to give an idea. So let's take the void of space, but it's empty, and you've got a star. Let's say you've got a super giant star that shines light in all directions of the void. So anywhere in that infinite void that you're in, you can see that little pinprick sun that is this massive giant star. Okay, that's the first planet. The second planet, orbiting bodies. The second one is a black hole that's so massive that its range of drawing in light is infinite. So no matter how far out the light of that sun goes, the black hole has the influence to draw the sun back into it. Now, if you know about black holes, they're the only thing in the universe that we know of, I think, at least last time I checked, that the gravitational pull is so strong that it draws in light, which is why it's a black hole, because light doesn't come out of it, because any light that would reflect out of that, whatever it is, can't come back, it gets sucked in. So there's the yin yang. So the sun and the black hole orbit each other. Black hole sucks in all the sun's light, the sun emits the light into the infinite void, and they go around. Okay, this is just hypothetical. This is just an analogy. That actually may be something that can occur. I don't know, but you get the idea. Now the next thing with the yin yang symbol, where you've got, if you don't know what the yin yang symbol is, you can look it up. But it's basically, you've got the white section flowing into the black section, and the black section has a white dot, and the white section has a black dot. Okay, so the reason that exists, I should know this, the tetragram, I really need to look that up, but anyway, the reason it exists like that is because when you have one point of reference, the Taiji pole, for a long time I was like, awesome, you plant the pole in the darkness, and not really darkness, and then the whole universe can appear now. But if you really play it out, the only thing that little dot Tai Chi pole will give you is an idea that something can exist relative to that. But the distance between that, whatever it is, and the Tai Chi pole is relative. So it could be increasing or decreasing, you wouldn't know. You just know they haven't collided or expanded beyond observable relation. And you know that object and the Tai Chi pole have to be of equal mass, otherwise they wouldn't collide. If one is bigger than the other, one would collide into the other. And the question is, well, if they're equal mass, then they should still collide into the other eventually. And the answer to offset that, and it might not be gravity, like if it's a fundamental particle, it could be, I don't know, strong or weak force, I don't know how those work. I really should know more about this before I post the video, but I'm talking about I know about Tai Chi and Taoism. I'm not as well equipped with scientific, like quantum physics and astrophysics and things like that. So if I don't know something, I'll definitely tell you, but I'm using these as just analogies at this point to describe something that's very primal in the universe that is described in Taoism. And so you've got the Tai Chi point of reference and the whatever it's describing, they have to be equal amount of matter, and whatever force draws them in, with magnetism, gravity, or whatever, there has to be a equal and opposite force pulling them out. And the conception of it on a macro level is orbit, and that's the perfect orbit, because you have to have the two masses orbiting like that. Because even if you say you have the sun and the earth, well, that's a fixed distance too, but it's not, because the earth has a little bit of gravitational pull on the sun. And even if it's a minute amount, it can't match up with the fact that Tai Chi and the other object are perfectly placed. So the only kind of orbit that can exist in our universe is the yin-yang orbit. And how they figured this out, I don't know, it's brilliant. But so you've got the Taiji and the fixed object, and there's equal and opposite forces. You can't say it's orbiting visually, because since there's no external frame of reference except for the Tai Chi pole, all you know is there has to be a centripetal force. So there's velocity, tangential velocity, to counteract the drawing in, and so the centripetal makes it, like, draws it out. So you've got the opposite forces now. The tangential velocity is either that way or that way, and again, without a point of reference, you don't know which direction it is. So you see how the Tai Chi pole, being the supreme ultimate point of reference, really isn't giving you a lot of reference at all. Besides the fact there is a relative distance, and there is a relative tangential velocity, and there's relative opposite forces, but you can't say the quantity of any of these things because they're not comparable to anything else. the only existence by relation are the two objects at this point. So the next step is, and that's existence by relation. So what you have is the Tao, which is I don't know if you should say non-existent. The Tao is inconceivable. Out of the Tao is the Wuji, which is unobservable. And then out of the Wuji is the Taiji, which is existence by relation, which is the yin-yang symbol. And then in the Tao Te Ching, it says from the two become the three. So existence by relation becomes existence by distinction, because when you have two things relating, this thing can't exist independent of this thing. But with distinction, if two things are distinct, if this disappears, you still have this thing, or if this disappears, you still have this thing. So they don't necessarily interact by relation in that way. And then the question that really bothered me for a long time and I couldn't figure out is like, how do you, if you have one Tai Chi pole, how do you have existence by distinction, which is the third? And my teacher told me that the third is going to be the separation. If you have the yin-yang symbol, that little thing in between, the separation is the third. And I was like, okay, so how do you separate two different orbits? Because like if you have one yin-yang symbol and the other yin-yang symbol, they're identical. You can't distinguish between the two. It doesn't even exist by relation, it's just one of them, right? And the answer that finally figured out after like a day of thought experiments is there is one distinction, and that is if this yin-yang symbol goes that way and this yin-yang symbol goes that way. So literally what you have is two orbits, like the sun and the black hole and the sun and the black hole, that aren't in relation with each other gravity. It's almost like they're in their own different universes, like they both count a Wuji in different dimensions. But in this universe, it's going basically, and again, you can't infer velocity, which direction. So basically, whichever way this is going, you just assume that this is in the opposite relation. So the relational existence between the two different orbits is the fact that their orbits are opposite. And you don't know if they're opposite that way or opposite that way, but you just know they're opposite. So that's the existential relations there. And now you've got, from that existential relation, you've got two distinctions, you've got two distinct orbits. And the reason I'm saying they're in different dimensions is because if they're in the same dimension, their gravitational fields, they'd have influence on each other and they wouldn't be able to, I don't know, it just wouldn't be the same. So we're going to take a little detour at this point and go to the ways that Tai Chi can return to Wuji. And there's two ways that Tai Chi can return to Wuji. And the first one is if you take that tangential, we're going to go back to one orbit. You take the tangential orbit and you take that velocity, and instead, if it's going up that way, because you don't know how, there's no reference to know how, the degree of the velocity. But if you change the direction, if you try to make this one like the one over there, when it goes past that point, from whatever velocity that is to whatever velocity that is, even without a frame of reference, you know there's a point where it's zero, because there has to pass a zero to change directions. With this, as that happens, the sun and the black hole, once they hit zero, the black hole absorbs the sun into the singularity, the infinite singularity, which is, if that's not Wuji, if that's not a good representation of Wuji, I don't know what a better analogy I can make for you. But the sun gets absorbed and extinguished, and now the universe, you have the black hole singularity, and then you have the entire infinite void of the universe without light. And so you go back to the Wuji thing. Remarkable how this works. I have no idea how the Taoists came up with this kind of stuff before they knew what black holes were. But and then the second one was like, okay, so how does the sun win? And this one took me a while. But basically, the only way the sun could win is if it got to a point where the black hole no longer had influence over it. Now, if the black hole has being the maximum black hole, where anywhere, no matter where the light goes, it can draw the light in. So with the yin-yang symbol, existence by relation, there can't be a relationship if they're one. So if the black hole and the sun collapse and it's one point, well, now you're back to Wuji, which is, because the Tai Chi's gone, you're back to Wuji no pole, which is why everything's in darkness and you're not sure if it exists or not because you can't observe it. And then, the thought experiment I played was like, that means the opposite one would have to be where it turns, where the acceleration, instead of the acceleration, the tangential velocity going here to here, and you're changing directions. What if you increase the acceleration? And again, you can't even know the degree of the acceleration because there's no frame of reference, but you can determine that the velocity is increasing. You don't know about how much, but it is. And you just take that velocity, and there's no reason in this dimension to say you can't go past the speed of light. In our universe, obviously you can't, and but in whatever this no reference universe is, the fact there's not a reference for the speed of light, there, why not? And so you accelerate it past the speed of light, it goes past relativistic speeds. It's a little complicated, but basically, when the two planets, as they accelerate, their distance has to increase to match the fact that the wider the orbit, the less oh god, I might not be seeing this right. Let's put it this way: as they get closer, the two objects have a greater draw against each other. Like if you know about magnetism or gravity, this exerts based off on this one. This exerts based off this one. It's based off distance. So if you half the distance, you'll double the force. Basically, what's drawing them together will double, and then so if you double it out, then it gets half. Double it out, gets half. Double it out, gets half. So as the acceleration of the orbit increases, the objects will go out, and once it accelerates past the speed of light, what happens is that the two objects are beyond observable distance. Now, if the black hole can't observe the sun, that means the sun's light is not reaching the black hole, so there's no observable distance. The black hole doesn't have influence on the sun, so therefore it can't exist by relation. If a black hole exists in relation to the sun and now it doesn't see the sun anymore, it disappears, and the sun emits light into the universe and has none of it drawn away, so now you're in immense brightness. But the thing is, again, which you wouldn't know about Taoism, the fact that everything's bright now, you can't discern anything because there's no observable, relation to compare things either. So you're back to Wuji, and you're like, well, I thought Wuji was darkness. Well, no, not technically. Wuji is just when there's no observable relation. So going to infinitely white is still Wuji, just like going to infinitely black. So that's the detour. Now, the next part is that with fundamental particles in physics, basically the smallest particles that make up matter, not just atoms, but like what makes up atoms, and even with electrons to an extent, because they do have two magnetic poles. What happens is that they have I think I'm making a video. Sorry. Okay, go. No. I got her new healthy cat food, and she's gonna be, as she gets older, she's gonna be diabetic if I don't take care of her. So she's not happy with her new food. Anyway, no. Fundamental particles. I did a little bit of research. As far as I can tell, I could be wrong. That they all have a positive and negative spin. They each have a spin, but there's not a degree to the spin as far as a direction. Like there's not, like if you have a spin, it's not like, oh, this one's spinning this way, or this one's spinning a little bit diagonally, and this one's spinning a little bit up. It's just, there's only, as far as observable description and what they've seen, like when they throw electrons through a sorter, a random sorter, they were expecting to find different kinds of electrons, but really there's only two groups, and one's positive spin, so they designated one positive spin, one negative spin. Fascinating thing, apparently on the quantum level, all of the particles, all the quantum particles in the entire universe, if you were to change the spin on one of them, somewhere else in the universe there would have to be a change on another to balance, because it's always balanced. I'm not sure what that is, but it's fascinating. And then so going back to Taoism and the way you've got the two orbits, one's positive, one is negative. With the beginning of the Big Bang, there was the heat. Basically, there was an extreme amount of light and neutrino particles, I think, just a few. But what happened, the heat was so, hot at the beginning of the universe that it acted as a sort of catalyst. Sorry, a guy keeps texting me. I don't know if it's showing up in video or not. That basically you've got matter, antimatter particles. So you take a photon and if you have a certain amount of light energy, it can form into one matter and one antimatter particle, and the catalyst makes them, they went back and forth. So then you could take the matter antimatter particle, and the scientific term is annihilate into light energy, and it was going back and forth. Then when all of the matter in our observable universe right now, at least as far as last time I checked, what science is saying is that it's the matter. So you had antimatter and matter particles, but for some reason there's matter particles, and not really sure where the antimatter particles went, and it's regarded in the scientific community currently as unexplained, and it's called the matter asymmetry problem, I think, matter asymmetry, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But basically, so like I said, you had the Taiji with one spin orbit and the Taiji with the other spin orbit. So those are the matter and antimatter particles, at least according to my theory. And when the universe cooled, you had the light and then the matter antimatter particles, and they weren't interchanging anymore, so whatever it was at that time. And then between there and where we are now, the antimatter particles are not weakened. So as far as with our five senses and then the scientific equipment we have that utilize our senses, physical senses, don't, they're able to create antimatter particles on with electron, atom smashers, atom colliders, or whatever. But it's very difficult, and when they do, they try to make an element of the antimatter element, and it's and I don't know if it's stable or not, but it's difficult. It's difficult to do, and it costs a lot of money. And if you just do one atom, that with super amount of effort, you get the idea. So and we have a whole universe of matter, and stars and billions of stars and trillions of trillions of stars and billions of galaxies, and whereas the antimatter, so what's going on with that? The reason we don't see antimatter is because, and here this is going to branch off, sorry scientists, but the antimatter particles are linked with the matter particles still, except the antimatter particles they exist in relation to the matter particles such that the antimatter particles can't be viewed relative to matter. So us being made of matter particles, our five senses can't access the antimatter, and it doesn't interact, except the fact it does interact. It's just that the only way you would know is to be able to see what's happening over there. And then the way I was saying, you've got the two different orbits that are in separate dimensions because they can't interact, and so that's when a certain amount of light energy goes into those two different orbits. And then the distinction, when I told you how they're distinct, and when they come together, the light energy is that distinction. So the yin yang, and again, I know this is complicated, but the yin yang with the third in between them, that's the annihilation between the matter and antimatter particle, and light is the third entity. So again, in Taoism, it says the Tao, the inconceivable, the non-existent. Again, they're going to argue when we say non-existent, but what can't be named, the Tao that someone speaks of is not the Tao, kind of thing. And then that goes to Wuji, which is unobservable, and then that goes to Taiji, which is existence by relation, and then that goes to the three, which is existence by distinction, which is the two coming together, matter, antimatter coming together to form light. So that's the three, and that's what was in the beginning of creation with the Big Bang. You had the three, and then it says the three leads to the 10,000 things, or the 10,000 substances. Basically, in Chinese, or at least back then, 10,000 just meant everything. And so all things, everything around us, anything we can see or experience comes from the three, which makes sense because with Einstein equals mc squared, you have the matter particle and the light energy are not only interrelated, but in the beginning they go back and forth, and they still could with the antimatter particle, but we don't have the antimatter particles. So, okay, so the next thing, so you got the three, and so you got the light energy and the matter and antimatter particles that exploded out of the Big Bang that gave existence to everything. Now the next thing is that what you have with light is basically the way the Taiji gives on the fundamental primal side of what constitutes existence based off relational existence. You can't say that Taiji is light, but light absolutely is. If the universe was created based off intention, light was intended to be a representation of that original Taiji. Because what does light do? It gives reference to the darkness. So you're in a complete blackness. You walk into a pitch black room, that represents Wuji, because you don't know if anything's there or if everything's there. But everything in that room you would say is already there. But the fact that you can't see it, you don't know. And so that's kind of like what is a Wuji. Like everything was already there, but if you couldn't see, you're not sure. So it could be everything or nothing. All possibilities are void. And but you turn on the light switch, and now the room's illuminated. You have the point of reference. You can see everything. So you see how that starts out with the Wuji bringing into the 10,000, existence of everything. The other thing too, with what makes light interesting, is that, and again, I don't know how the Taoists knew this, but it gives absolute reference not just to observable, like the observable universe is based basically how far away light comes back to us, and any, not just necessarily visible radiation, obviously, probably be more reliable, but however we can pick it up that way. And God, I lost my train of thought. So light energy is also the fundamental reference for space and time, which is fascinating because remember, we go back to Wuji being that singular point just after the Big Bang. It's like, is Wuji after creation or before, after the Big Bang or before the Big Bang? You see that Wuji is just filled with paradoxes. So you've got that point of space-time where there's no relative for location, because there's no distance even on one dimension without the Taiji, obviously, and there's no duration of time. So you've got that point. And so the way that the light gives reference to the things in space-time, it actually gives reference to space-time, because if you want to know, how much time's going by relative to another object, you just have to, what are you going to use? Oh, by the way, the speed of light, if you calculate based off the speed of your, based off the other thing, you'll know, how much time's being bent or whatever, and that's based off light too. And then also, of course, special relativity and general relativity, in that when you're around objects with, mass, time will slow down as you get closer to the objects. And, which again goes back to the Taiji causing the sun and the black hole. As they get closer, time slows down until the sun goes into the void where time's 1 point, or if they get further away, time goes into infinity until the black hole's not there anymore. And you see that in the universe too, as you get closer to a body of mass. For example, and apparently GPS systems have to take into account this when they do calculations. But when you have a GPS measurer on the surface of the planet versus in orbit, there's a time differential, time dilation, just because the one on the Earth is closer to the mass of the Earth, which is fascinating. Which just means if you're any point in your body relative to the center of the Earth, you're standing up, your head's going to be going at a different time than your feet, however imperceptibly small. Anyway, so but yeah, you see that because the way the orbits had to go past light speed to expand beyond observable relation or crash into infinite by getting closer together. You see that in general relativity and special relativity. And yeah, I don't know, I think I'm going to end the video there, but basically you see all these patterns, both in Taoism and how things exist, and like how could there be one point of reference, and how would that come about to what we see today, not just philosophically, because Taoism is a philosophy, right, but you see based off what we've discovered scientifically that the patterns line up as well. And just the fact, when I thought about the distinction of the two orbits being defined only opposite in relation, I was like, that and I was like, wait a second, there's fundamental particles that only have positive and negative spins, and just went down that rabbit hole. Most of this I've just figured out with thought experiments. I wrote it down, but it's really complicated. It hurts my head for me to read, even though I'm the one that wrote it. So I'm hoping if I tell in story format, in a way people can understand, or maybe you can go back and listen to it again. This has been 30 minutes, so it's a good place to stop. It goes on. Even, like the next, if I was going to do another video, I would talk about the antimatter particles and how they exist and how they relate and how they interact with matter particles, and then how the Wuji interrelates with light, interrelates with physical matter, and insubstantial substance, and then also how people interrelate with the environment. That's what the next one's going to have to be, because there's the intending, the mind intent, how you go about moving physical matter, and then there's the emotional intent about how you go about, not just what you do, intend to do, but how the qualities of how you go about doing things, and how that affects things. And both of those do have reference in Taoism, and as far as how we go about observing, experiencing reality. So I'll do that next time, and I'll call it quits, and I appreciate you watching, and you have a good day.